Hi, Black Hollywood Live fans. Today we are talking Paul Walker, Empire, Suge Knight, Dre, and more on Justice is Served.
You are tuned into Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
Hello, Justice fans. Thanks for joining us again. My name is Chelsea Galicia, and I am joined by my co-host, Shaka Smith, for another episode of Justice is Served. We've got three stories from Hollywood, 2 stories from around the country, and 1 from around the world. Nice variety of things to talk about today. Let's get started with Paul Walker's death lawsuit. It has now been 2.5 years, right? Or so since he died in a crash in a Porsche that was being driven by his friend. There have been 2 wrongful death lawsuits filed against Porsche. One by the widow of the driver, Roger Rodas, and one by Paul Walker's daughter, Meadow. And just recently, this last week, the case by the widow got tossed out by the judge. Did you understand why the judge didn't think that this case had any merits?
It seems that what they alleged, for the most part, regarding the injuries to Roger Rodas and why he died, the judge found there was no nexus between Porsche's what they were claiming was the problem or the cause of the death and the actual cause of death.
Right. So even if the case was able to prove that the Porsche had a design flaw, it would have to be proved that that design flaw itself was a cause of death.
Exactly.
So in this case, there were 3 main claims. One is that the Porsche was not designed to take like a side impact, but the judge said that Roger Rodas didn't die of the side impact. The fatal impact was a forward frontal impact. So that was 1. 2 was the suspension of the car, whatever claim that she had made, the widow. Apparently the judge didn't see really evidence of that.
Exactly.
And then the last one was about the fuel cell.
Yeah, the fuel cell and the fire that was caused, but of course Roger Rodas did not die of the fire, he died of the impact.
So this looks like it could be bad news for Meadow Walker's case, except for, I think the difference is that Paul Walker, as I understand it, survived the initial crash and he died because of the fire. And so we have slightly different circumstances, and that one may lead Paul Walker's daughter to be successful where Roger Rodas's widow was not.
They'll have to look into the fuel cell and whether there was indeed a design defect and if that defect caused the fire.
I think still it's somewhat of a long shot. Are you on the same page?
Because I recall that they were driving at a high rate of speed, and for the most part, it looked to be driver error.
Right.
So.
And because of driver error, it seems to be legally the thing that makes most sense is for Meadow to sue the estate of Roger Rodas. We know that the 2 were really good friends, Paul Walker and Roger Rodas, and it would seem, I don't know, pretty difficult for Meadow to go and sue Roger Rodas's family.
Well, she certainly may be able to sue the insurance and maybe recover some remedy in that sense. So
it would still look, to the media at least, it would look like
you're suing a friend.
But and you're right. In reality, you're suing for benefits from the insurance company.
Yes, not the person. Well, hopefully, they'll decline to sue that family.
Right. Or because if it went beyond the insurance policy, then cash might have to come out of whatever's left of the estate if it is beyond whatever the coverage is from that insurance. So I don't know. That's a tough call.
I don't know. With these kind of cases, sometimes I think it's enough to say there was an error that was made, no lawsuit needed, awful tragedy, but let's move on.
We'll see if that's what ends up happening. Speaking of moving on, the judge in one of many lawsuits against the Empire TV show has tossed out one of the cases.
It was John Astor White had a claim that King Solomon, this show that he had been ripped off by Empire. However, what he was not able to establish was that they actually saw King Solomon, or that anyone, cast or crew, actually had any knowledge of this show that he had. So that was a critical element when you're proving that.
Well, my understanding is that the guy, John Astor White, thought that somebody else had connected it to Lee Daniels or somebody, and so he didn't directly show the treatment, but that somebody else did. It was a long shot.
Yeah,
and
he wasn't able to prove it. Had he proven that, he might have had a very strong case.
And the judge kind of ripped apart the specific similarities that he claimed were so similar.
Yeah.
The one that was like really ridiculous is that he said that the youngest the youngest child in Empire and the daughter in his show were both of feminine gender-like qualities.
Yeah.
And so that was just one of sort of more ridiculous claims that the judge was like, are you serious?
Yeah,
with
in
this?
Empire they have a gay character, and I think referring to that in that sort of anachronistic terminology did not sit well with the judge.
Right. So that one is out. We'll see if any of the other ones end up sticking.
Yeah, certainly if they can show that they actually knew and read a treatment, that's going to be very powerful. But until that happens, it'll be very difficult to prove a copyright issue there.
Yeah, probably not going to happen. Yeah. All right. So apparently, Suge Knight is, as we know, sitting in jail. He's not having that great a time in there. I don't know if anybody does have a great time in there, but he has had more of his rights revoked than most people sitting in jail do. So, for example, he's not really allowed phone calls or visitors except for his attorneys. And in a court document to try and get back some of those privileges, he lays out this accusation against Dr. Dre, saying that he conspired with the LA Sheriff's Department to kill him. Mm-hmm. That apparently that whole thing that happened at One Oak.
Yeah, I live just down the street. There was that shooting in One Oak about 2 years ago.
Yeah, in 2014, right before the
VMAs.
The
VMAs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Suge claims that there was the sheriff let the guy in.
Yeah, was it Deputy Boyd?
Yeah, but I don't know, how does that mean that Boyd knew that this was the guy, he knew he was carrying a gun?
Well, what they're contending is not only did Boyd let this guy in, but that there's video footage at LAX of this deputy also helping the shooter escape and flee.
How does it show, how does that video show somebody helping escape and flee? I mean, does the guy not have the right to fly?
Well, if they have proof that Deputy Boyd let him into One Oak, and there's also video of Deputy Boyd at LAX escorting this guy to a plane, then that's going to be pretty damning. However, no, the video has not surfaced. They're just claiming that video exists.
Gotcha. Okay. And apparently the guy who did it has admitted that Dre paid him and a friend $50,000 to do it. I don't know who this guy is or what kind of
and apparently they're saying after he was arrested, he was let go by the sheriff's department, and then later on, Officer Boyd went and helped him at LAX escape. Of course, Dre is saying these charges are ridiculous, these accusations are ridiculous. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, the lawyer is alleging a lot of very specific evidence he will have to produce. Yeah. So when you say you have a video, that video is going to have to be shown.
I mean, it's all very interesting. Yeah. Reads like a soap opera.
It's like,
we'll see how much of it turns out to be real life. All right, so from around the country now, a domestic violence victim was just found not guilty for murdering her abuser. Mm-hmm. This is always a controversial issue as to whether abuse sort of as a defense to murder. So in this case, we're talking about a 24-year-old woman who had been subjected to her boyfriend's abuse for years. Yeah. One incident including being strangled with a belt in front of their own child. Yeah. And she had tried breaking up with him, and he was stalking her, and he showed up someplace and she backed her car sort of into him and pinned him against a wall or
apparently
something.
He ran after her, and he's on the hood of the car, and so this was during he was assaulting her further when this happens. And I think it's important to know, while domestic violence is never a good thing, you cannot just go murder the abuser. But there was no cooling off period in this particular instance.
I mean, I'm almost surprised that there wasn't. Because there was self-defense, it seems, in the moment.
Exactly.
But it seems that the real theory that allowed her to get off was just knowing that their relationship was so dangerous and physical that this was appropriate in light of their relationship.
And I think it made it more plausible because, her allegation is what she says happened is that he ran after her. She's in the car. He's on the hood of the car, and boom, a crash happened, and she doesn't really know. It happened so quick she couldn't really kind of detail specifics, which would sound initially a little sketchy, but I think the past history of abuse made that a lot more plausible.
And the interesting thing about this story is that this involved a black woman, and statistically, when black women claim abuse as a domestic violence abuse as a defense, it does not go as well as often as it does for non-minority women. So that made this one at least.
So it was a victory, but she was in jail for quite some time.
3 years.
For 3 years, she had a hung jury the first time. She's on $1 million bail, which I still don't understand because she has a young child. She didn't seem to be like a flight risk. So that was just kind of
and it didn't seem like this was something that she might, repeat again.
Yeah. So it was a tragedy in of itself to have the bail that high and have her in jail for 3 years while, the first hung jury and now again. But at least she's out now, so.
So it goes. All right. And now a disturbing story, another one involving an officer shooting an unarmed. Well, maybe this guy was not quite unarmed. I think at the time.
Well, he was unarmed at the time.
So we're talking about a Texas story where an officer comes into a hotel after being called of reports of a guy shooting or aiming a rifle out of a window.
Yeah, so it turns out he was there. He was an exterminator, and he would shoot these birds with these kind of like a rifle-looking pellet guns. And so he had gotten drunk with a couple of friends in his room, and he was showing off this gun in his room and shooting different things outside or pointing the rifle outside. So obviously bad behavior, a little intoxicated. The police get called, and they ask him to come out of the room, which he does. At this point, he realizes that he's in trouble. So they have him crawl towards the police guy.
This is Officer Philip Mitch Brailsford.
Yes, and they have him crawling towards him. And apparently, as he's crawling towards the officer, there's a person on the ground from another female that had also to crawl towards the officer as they were getting them out of the room. And as he's kind of moving around the purse, the officer believes, or so he says, that he might have been reaching for a weapon and, opens fire on this guy.
After he's asking, please don't shoot, please don't shoot.
Begging to not be shot. And he's intoxicated at the time, so he's not necessarily understanding all their commands. Some officers on the scene said that he appeared to be intoxicated and may not have understood exactly what they were saying, but that he definitely said don't shoot, and he's on his knees at this point.
And the officer who shot him said that he appeared to be reaching towards his back or something where he could have pulled something out, but there was nothing on him.
Yeah, and I think it's just a case of an kind of a gun-happy officer. So one of the things the officers are in trouble for, he had an etching on his gun. And he also had an etching on the holster of his gun, which you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to write anything on it. And I believe it was one of the phrases that he had etched in was "come and get it," was what means "come and get it."
Jeez.
Yeah. And another phrase that he had, it said "you're fucked."
Okay.
Yeah. And so it already shows you that mentality that he was.
He is quite fucked. He's been charged with second-degree murder and, of course, terminated from the police department where he worked. Second-degree murder sound like a fair charge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have an officer that does this and he's holding out his gun and his uniform as a badge of pride in terms of killing people, that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of disclosing officers' names, there is a big story that now it's the beginning of 2016, or already we're like in the second quarter of it, but the numbers from 2015 are out that 990 people were shot and killed by police. The vast majority of them were armed people, and in some of the cases they release the officers' names, but in many cases they don't. It varies by,
I believe it was like 1 in 5 they don't release the officer's name.
Right. And it varies by state. And the question comes down to, we want police transparency.
Absolutely.
And so victims' families want officers' names released. And the police officers want to protect their own identities from people who would be mad that they, shot somebody and could come after them, and so they fear for their safety. And this whole, debate, no matter what state we're talking about here, it's all trying to balance
officer safety with public good. Exactly.
Right.
But once you decide to take on the job of a police officer, I think it should come with the territory. If you shoot and kill someone, it's going to be disclosed. That should just be standard. That you shouldn't. And I don't know how well founded it is that these officers' lives will be in jeopardy once it's disclosed that they've shot and killed someone. When you're a member of the police department, you have protection, you have resources that ordinary people don't. If you and I were to shoot somebody and kill someone, our names would be everywhere. And so I think in order to truly be transparent and regain public trust, that needs to be a national policy.
Yeah.
Dash cams should be revealed,
Yeah. These police unions, though, are really involved and really powerful, and they have fought for delaying the release of the names or releasing them only in situations where the officer has been charged. Is that a fair middle ground? Let's only release the name if the officer has been charged?
No, I don't think so. I think it's important to know, like, an officer's history, whether it's disciplinary conduct, regardless of shooting and killing someone. I think all of these things should be made public, and I think you'd have a better in general, in every city and state, better police departments.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, and so now the big story from around the world. We got through this so fast. All right, so I don't know if you have all heard of these things called the Panama Papers. Yeah. They've come out, and I think you're going to hear a whole lot more about them in the coming weeks and months. So I want to lay down the foundation now of, like, what are these things and why do they matter? So a whole year ago, a massive amount of data. I don't even know how much a terabyte is. Is it a million gigabytes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so 2.6 terabytes of information. This is much larger than the WikiLeaks.
Yeah, that Snowden leak. Yeah.
Right. This is much more massive.
Far more massive. Yeah.
Was released data from a law office in Panama. This law office, Mossack Fonseca, specializes in creating
havens, yes.
Yeah, and shell corporations. A corporation which really doesn't do anything. It has, like, no people involved. It has no employees, doesn't provide a product or service. It's really just to
hide the money of the very wealthy.
Exactly. So they set up offshore accounts for clients, and they were sent a lot of business from, like, the big banks to do these things. And it's not illegal to have offshore accounts, but it generally tips suspicion of tax evasion,
exactly,
money laundering. Some of the people that have these kinds of accounts are mafia members, people involved in the drug cartels, things of that nature.
And that's why you kind of have these to avoid paying taxes,
Right. So this leak somehow occurred, it's not well known, that the data from the law firm went to a German newspaper like a year ago. So it's like 11.5 million documents that people have spent a whole year sifting through to see who is named as being associated with or involved in any of these kinds of accounts, corporations, things of that nature. And it turns out that there are a whole lot of world leaders, businessmen, celebrities, all named, either named specifically or they're very close associates or wives even. One situation for the Prime Minister of Britain, it was his father that was named as having such an account. And so this is having huge ramifications around the world, or at least people are having really dramatic responses to the corruption.
We had the resignation,
Right. So Iceland, the population was up in arms about this, a massive protest, and the Prime Minister stepped aside because he was named as having had an account. And I read this morning that there's some sort of Department of Transparency in Chile, and the president of that transparency department was forced to resign after he was named in this. So it'll be very interesting to see the reaction from around the world. So far, Putin was named, or one of his very close friends has had some kind of account that about $2 billion has gone through. Of course, Putin and his people have said this is ridiculous, has nothing to do with us. This is just, he called it I don't know how to even pronounce it, Putinophobia. He's trying to say that people are just, I guess, want to be afraid of Putin, and so they're saying these ridiculous things about him. Similar stories from people in the Chinese government that have been accused or shown of.
It almost reminds me of that Heidi Fleiss case, but on a global level. Remember, every prominent person in Hollywood was very nervous about that leak.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, there is names from, Pakistan to Argentina to, just so many countries, so many leaders. A soccer star was named in there. So a lot of people, and we don't know everything because it hasn't all been released to us.
So time will tell.
Right. So the first question that a lot of people have is, why aren't we seeing any Americans named in there? And the couple of reasons for there not being any are kind of interesting. Number one is because there's other places besides Panama that are apparently better to do this sort of thing. British Virgin.
Yeah, the Caribbean is very...
Cayman Islands. Yeah. And so Panama is just not that...
Not the hot spot for...
Right, not since like the 80s or something. Yeah. So that was one reason. Another reason is that a lot of global organizations... Well, I'm going to take that back. One global organization that I know of and other countries that I know of have accused the United States of being a tax haven. Like if you open up a corporation from Delaware or Nevada, that it gives you a lot of privacy rights. And so a lot of people are doing this kind of thing right here.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why Americans haven't been named. But the German newspaper who has all of this information hasn't just let all the information out. They're letting their own stories about it come out now. And they've said they haven't released anything. And when asked about Americans, they said, just hold on, there's more.
It's exciting, huh?
It's a little exciting. I'm big on this corruption thing. In fact, I leave tomorrow morning to D.C. to participate in a march and sit in at the Capitol regarding anti-corruption legislation that we're trying to get pushed through. We'll see. This is a bipartisan effort, so I think I'm a big fan of cracking down on it here and abroad. And I think something like this that shows how pervasive it is.
Absolutely.
Is good for all of us to get behind and crack down on, because I don't know of many people, except probably the people who have these accounts, that think that this is fair, that people are being able to stash all this money away, not paying taxes on it, and then a lot of the programs and education, roads, infrastructure, all sorts of things suffer, and people are like, well, we don't have the money for it, but the truth is it's all hiding out offshore.
Yeah, and I think the people that even do it don't think it's fair, but it just is working in their favor.
They found the laws and they're able to
just
pull
like you have the Minister of Transparency. So I think you might see some people get caught up in that kind of double speak,
Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting. Stay tuned for that, because I know that there's going to be more developments on that, and we will bring them all to you, as well as any breaking legal news.
Will you be calling in live next week to detail?
We can see. We'll see. And I'll definitely send you a picture if I get arrested.
If your phone is not confiscated.
This will be the first time that I would ever see the inside of a jail cell.
Yeah, well, sometimes social justice and change requires a little sacrifice.
Exactly. That sounds like a perfect reason why you should come join me.
Oh, not at all. Not my sacrifice. A sacrifice.
Well, hopefully it won't get to that point, but I'm excited to participate in it anyway.
That's awesome.
All right, so I will not be here next week. Shaka will be, and then I will be back the week after that.
And we'll have Shannon, correct?
Yes.
Shannon
yes. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Justice is Served. Don't forget to tweet us at Chelsea Galicia.
At Shaka Strong on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to download us on iTunes and rate us 5 stars.
And comments, please. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
From executives Keven Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.